Well, you've probably seen the video we took of the two farmers, but we also did a couple of them independently. And here's one with Fred Stope that we talked to Fred about both his operation, but I think the information that we're going to get here about the walnuts are going to be kind of fascinating to you. Then we'll take up some of his hobbies. So here's Fred across the south side of Grainland, and we're going to talk about the walnut trees over here, and particularly the grafting.
This orchard is planted on paradox rootstock, which is a hybrid between California black walnut.
And that's this up here.
That's this up to this point.
What was this, a foot high or so when you first put it in the ground?
Well, it was about this tall.
Okay, so it was up about 3 feet.
Because the piece that you put onto the rootstock is about that long and has about 3 buds on it.
Okay.
And so it's fairly short, and then the bud starts to grow and stretches on up.
And what variety is this?
This is a Howard.
This is a Howard.
Yes.
Okay. We've got a fairly new tree because the old tree either worn out or had some problem with it and you had to take it out. So how long have you had this one in the ground?
This would have been planted last spring in 2016, and you have the rootstock is here. You can see this little line right in here is where the sign, or the actual variety, was grafted onto the rootstock. And this is the sort of the callus tissue here that develops as the two grow together. This is a Howard.
This is a Howard orchard area.
This is a Howard block.
So this is a young Howard walnut tree.
And this little section here, that's the sides of the graft wood that was actually grafted onto this. And this particular one was done in the nursery. I bought it as a grafted tree.
Okay. So this is among its brothers and sisters here.
Yes, they're all vegetatively propagated, so they're all the same, genetically they're all the same.
Now this young tree's got a problem because all of its neighbors and family is way up in the air.
Or shading it out.
It's got it. So when you have to replace one, I would assume it takes a lot longer for this replacement to get up as it did when they were all the same size.
Yeah, and it may never be as productive as the ones around it, just because it's going to stretch up taller. It's just going to be a different situation.
Okay. So we talked a little bit about bees pollinating almonds.
Right.
And we talked the fact that we don't need bees here. But we do need something here, don't we?
Yes. Walnuts typically have either the catkins that shed pollen first, and then the female flower becomes receptive later, or some varieties are the opposite, where the female flower is receptive first and then the catkins start shedding pollen later. So you need to have pollen that overlaps with the receptivity of the female flowers.
So how do you decide to plant in your orchard to get that to happen?
The university has charts that show when the maximum pollen shed is for each variety, and the point at which the female flowers are most receptive, and you just pick something that overlaps. And so here on this outside row, we have what are called Cisco's, which is the variety that was typically used when I was planting to cover both either Chandler or Howard. And they produce the pollen when the Howards are receptive, and then I don't know where they get their pollen, but obviously they still set some nuts.
Well, we know it's around because we see it yellow during that part of the year.
Right, and people with allergies don't like it.
Now, you say the outside row here. Are there any other areas throughout the orchard, or do you do only the outsides all the way around? How do you do that?
There was a point where they thought you needed a lot more pollinators than now. Now basically people go typically 2% pollinators. So I've got the Cisco's on every other row on this end and also on the other end of the block.
So you got them on the north and the south.
Because the primary wind direction is either north or south, so we're covered either way. There are people now who don't plant any pollinators at all because there's just plenty of pollen to go around.
Well, I would guess so, because this outside row here, if the wind's blowing south, you're pollinating Dax across the road here.
That's right.
And Dax, I assume, has got some pollinators over there.
He might.
He might. And if the wind's coming out of the north, he might pollinate some of yours.
If it's coming out of the north, this row will take care of it.
This row will take care of it.
Yeah.
Well, Fred, we've talked a lot about your orchard operations here, but I wanted to talk about some of the other things you did, and I want to talk about what a farmer does when he's not growing his orchard stuff. And we just took a nice shot of a tree that's not a walnut tree. It's what kind of tree?
It's a pecan.
It's a pecan tree. And when did you put that in?
Probably early 70s I put that in, and I've always had, tried to have a home orchard here because fruit always tastes better when it comes right off the tree, nice and fresh and fully ripe.
So this is kind of one of your hobbies. But it's also something that you do for a little production for yourself.
Sure.
So what are we looking at here behind? Is this part of your gardening work also?
Well, I started raising started planting flowers when I was 5, I think, and then I started raising some bedding plants when I was, I think, in the 2nd grade, and selling them to friends and so on. And so I've always fiddled around with gardening ever since.
Well, all the amateur gardeners will know what you mean by bedding plants, but what is a bedding plant?
Bedding plant is where you go to the seed catalog and you buy exactly the variety of whatever it is that you want, and you plant the seeds in a greenhouse in potting soil, and when it's the right size you take it out and plant it in the garden.
And how old were you when you started doing this and selling some of this?
I think I was 2nd, 3rd grade. My dad helped me build a little cold frame that I started.
That was Kenneth Stolt.
That's right.
Yeah, Kenneth Stolt, yeah. Because we've known your mom, Elizabeth, for a long time. So what do we have in here that you've planted? What are some of the things that you've got in here?
This is oregano right here. Dogwood trees, a white rose of Sharon back there, and a number of things that I don't remember what the names of them are. But,
now what do we got over here that we're not seeing that we'll go take a picture of?
This was my vegetable garden, although all I have out there this year is corn.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about this side over here. What have you? It looks to me like you've got something different.
Well, this was my vegetable garden. This was an attempt at growing some blackberries or boysenberries, except that they're probably more work than they're worth, so that's why they look so crummy. And then for a little bit of color, we've got zinnias in the background and some sweet corn.
So we've got water going on out here in this field. What are you doing there?
That's pasture back there for the sheep that belong to the neighbors across the Kimmelshoes across the street. And
well, now wait, let me get this. Dax said something about his daughter and him being in the sheep business.
Right.
But I'm on the south side of the road. I'm on the Stolt property.
That's right.
So are you telling me that this is the Kimmelshoe sheep over here?
That's correct. Dax came to me quite a number of years ago, and they were looking for a larger place to raise their sheep, and I had sold my goats and I wasn't raising steers anymore, and so the barn was available, and he asked whether they could rent the space and rent the pasture, and that's what's going on.
So this is the Kimmelshoe sheep barn ranch over here on the Stolt ranch.
That's correct, yes. So this is Candace Kimmelshoe and her friend Emily Wilkinson, and They're partners on the sheep operation, and they raise these for the 4-H'ers and the FFA people to take to the fairs.
So let's talk about what farmers do in their off hours. You've done a couple of things in your life that's interesting. Tell us about the barbershop quartet thing that you were involved with.
Well, I was never in a quartet, but I sang in a barbershop chorus locally, a couple different ones. A friend of mine introduced me to it, and I enjoyed that and did it for a number of years before I started getting so busy that I felt I didn't have time for it anymore.
Well, there's another place that people might recognize you from. Swim meets are very popular. Our kids swam in the swim meets. You've been involved in that for a while too, haven't you?
Yes, my daughter decided that she wanted to join the swim team, and I discovered very quickly that when you're at a swim meet, things go a lot faster when you're doing something. And so I started out in a timing chair and very quickly decided to become a swim official and learned stroke and turn, to be a stroke and turn judge, and then moved up to starter and referee, and over the years was the meet referee for quite a number of swim meets, invitational swim meets here locally, Durham, Orland, Quincy, as far away as Nevada City. And I've done it about 26 years now, and have a granddaughter in the water swimming now, and something that I've very much enjoyed over the years.
Well, it's fun to come out and see your place. It's also fun to kind of understand some of your hobbies, and I want to thank you, and we'll probably see you at a swim meet or somewhere else besides the farm. Thank you, Fred.
You're welcome.